When you look at LSU going into the 2025 season, Joe DeLeone says what?
This roster is incredibly talented. And I said this yesterday when we talked for our rankings or the rankings for the college football video game and why LSU should have been higher. I think that there's still question marks that need to be answered, which I'm going to get to in a second. But front to back, offense, defense, skill position, quarterback, defensive line, cornerback. This is the best roster, well-rounded roster that Brian Kelly has had at LSU, without a doubt. I know that we got excited in the hope of what they could have done in year one when they went to the SEC championship game, the excitement of what they did over this past season, what they could have potentially have become, and when Jaden Daniels went on to win the Heisman. But now you have a lot more talent and a lot more depth at key positions. It took a couple of years. It is not going to be an immediate hit the ground running type of a situation after what LSU was going through. I think the questions, though, that I need answered, Blake, for them to reach a national championship, for them to get to the college football playoff, which is all within striking distance, they are justifiably getting hyped up by every outlet because of the talent that they have. How good is their offensive line going to be this year after losing all the bodies that they did? Can Patrick Payton capitalize on the talent that he has in a completely new setting? Because he's going to be super important for their success. And I know you're going to have a take on that. And the last, could Joe Sloan get out of his own way? And can he actually commit to running the football? Because that I said every single week, where it felt like they abandoned the run way too quickly with a good offensive line. I felt like there was too much on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders as a passer that it felt like he thought he had to do everything. And it led to mistake after mistake after mistake. They need to run the ball better. And if their O-line steps up with a lot of new faces, this can be their season.
I'm going to push back on one thing. I don't think it's the most talented roster that BK's had. Let me tell you why.
Okay.
You had 4 first-round picks on that 2023 offense. 4. One kid was the rookie of the year. The other, Brian Thomas Jr., just led all rookies in receiving. By the way, Trevor Lawrence got hurt halfway through the year. Malik Neighbors was in the top 10. They freaking cut Daniel Jones midway through the year, and he still had 1,000 yards. I don't know if I can go most talented. We're talking about Jaden Daniels and that receiving core with Will Campbell, who was the top 5 pick, Mason Taylor, who was the second-round pick to the New York Jets, Emory Jones, who got selected by Baltimore. For me, I cannot go there yet. But I do think they're this is the most complete team that Brian Kelly's had because defensively what they can do. I agree. When you talk about most talented, it's very hard for me to get over the leap of Jaden Daniels. It's not hard for me to get to a completely different place of most complete. Joe, you brought up running the football and offensive line. They gave up 6 sacks in their spring game in the only half of spring football that they played. Will Campbell not being there is a problem. Here's another problem, though, that LSU fans need to perk up on. Joe, that edge rush unit might be elite. I saw a beating by Jack Pyburn, by Patrick Payton, by a former 5-star who's kind of coming out of his shell, and Gabe Rutherford. Jamari Butler had double-digit tackles for loss at Nebraska and is now here, and they're moving him all over the place. Joe, I do think that was a little bit to it with the offensive line. Still couldn't run the ball the last time I saw him. They got to get better. Now, they bring in a whole new staff to some regard in reference to the way that they want to run the football. They bring it in 2 years ago. They got to go get a new defensive line coach. There's still some turnover that they're trying to fix. Joe, they got to stop turning the ball over, and they got to start running the football. Defensively, I think they can be okay. Joe, I've had a hot take. I think I have seen in spring, and I'll already put a stamp on it, I think they can be a top 30 unit defensively. And I don't think that that's much to ask. Top 30? No. That would be a massive leap from 2 years ago when they were 108. I mean, Horrible. Could not stop a nosebleed with a tampon. They were horrible. The problem is I think that for that I would have that they're going to be better is mainly due to the fact DB room's completely overhauled. You got the number one safety in the portal in A.J. Halsey. You went and got the number one high school DB in DJ Pickett. Can that 5-star dude be ready? You really love Mansour DeLeone, meaning you, Joe. What is Mansour DeLeone going to mean for that secondary? They have not had that level of talent since they've been here. But, Joe, there's one thing that's got to happen. More than anything for LSU to find themselves in the playoff under Brian Kelly. Joe, in every SEC loss at LSU under Brian Kelly, they've given up 250 rushing yards on the ground defensively. They have got pushed around. You bring in Sadir Mitchell. You bring in Don McKinley, who is a former 5-star guy. You bring in some different pieces in the interior of that defensive line. Joe, the bottom line is, if Garrett Nussmeier does take that next step and he cuts those turnovers in half and makes better decisions, if the weapons that he got with Nick Anderson, if the weapons that he got with Chris Hilton being healthy and coming back, and so on and so forth, Trey'Dez Green, I'm really high on. Joe, if they're able to get stops defensively for once, they might be cooking with some grease. Because I do think ultimately Garrett is able to cut some of those turnovers down. And here's another hot take. I think offensively they will jive a little bit better to what Garrett wants to do. The bottom line remains, though, Joe, if they can't run the football and they can't stop the run, they're going to be back in the same spot that they were pretty much under Brian Kelly on the outside looking into the playoff. That's where they'll stand. They got to fix up front. They got to have a different toughness level. Now, you brought up something that might be true. BK coming into LSU in year one and him going to the SEC championship game might have been overselling what the current state of LSU currently was. They still had 36 scholarship players, and he still had to go get 40 from the portal. Joe, he had to get 40 players from the portal. Yeah. I mean, it was no structure. Then Jaden Daniels happened, and maybe the timeline got pushed up because he just went stupid. He went Cocoa for Cocoa Puffs. From a depth perspective and from a completeness perspective, I agree this could be their most complete team. But, Joe, again, LSU's got 3 massive question marks that nobody wants to get after. Interior of that defensive line, can Nuss cut down on the turnovers, and can you run the football? But, Joe, I got to be honest with you. I feel like that's massive question marks.
They are massive question marks, and I think why I feel there should be more optimism is that last offseason coming into the year, it was like a serious glaring issue, your defensive line, so much so that you were grabbing at scraps to get any bodies in your interior, and you failed. It was a failure of trying to rebuild that defensive line. This time around, it felt like you didn't have to be nearly as desperate. You can grab a Jack Pyburn, who's a good quality secondary college rusher, who's not going to go on to be a top 100 draft pick. He's a nice quality, bust your ass, hard-nosed kid. And you can bank on the talent of Patrick Payton with the surrounding bodies and the chemistry that you have in the locker room to tap into something there. He's got a lot to prove. And I really think that that is the catalyst for your biggest defensive success, because I know who Mansour DeLeone is as a player. He's been the same player for the past 2 years. He's been awesome. He's been great in coverage. I thought he was going to declare for the draft, but he decided to go back and he decided to take on this opportunity at LSU. And Harold Perkins come back healthy. You hope that you still get that athleticism roaming around your defense to go back there and make plays all over the field. But if Patrick Payton can be this 10-plus sack guy like we knew that he was 2 years ago, and he's locked in every single week, he is going to be super disruptive. You need that for your defense to take a step forward, because that's something that LSU hasn't had. And I think that was a big separator and a big killing point for them in a lot of their sloppy games. The thing that sucked for LSU last year, when you have as many underlying weaknesses that you didn't really notice and lacked as much depth as you did last year, your losses weren't just losses. They were frustrating as hell bad losses. The Florida game was bad. The Alabama game was bad. I think now when you have this much more depth, and
USC,
when you've got all these young guys that are stepping up and improving, you're going to prevent those games from happening in the future.
Look, you got to win week one. The 2 things that I would say here that I think that are that I am Joe, well, today's the 30th. So by August the 3rd, so Thursday, or July the 3rd, excuse me, Thursday, Joe, we're a month away before we're out there at camp and we're watching LSU. Okay, so
Crazy.
Think of this. That edge, I've been telling you about, like, hey, man, I went to every practice BK allowed us to be at, every one of them. Joe, all right, I'm just telling you, that edge, I've seen Patrick Payton and Jack Pyburn and Gabe Rutherford, remember the name, dog, either LSU's got an absolutely massive problem at tackle or this edge unit, God dog, bro. They have not had that. I'm sorry, they have not. Not from a collective. Harold Perkins comes back. He'll be in that star role. We'll see what happens there. But, Joe, the receiving core, including the tight ends that Garrett can have to throw to, could be something. Joe, when Chris Hilton came back, they were a lot better. Trey'Dez Green at tight end is a freak show. He is a freak show of an athlete. They got serious speed, man. They really do. LSU, to me, if I'm looking at it unbiased, 50,000-foot view here. 50,000-foot view, if you tell me LSU's in the playoffs, I don't blink an eye because you got high-level talent at some high-level positions. But I also have seen some worries, and I don't think LSU fans are taking into account how massive those worries can be. Like, brother, if you struggle on your offensive line with a quarterback who does not like to run, and it could be a recipe for disaster, a very big recipe of disaster. So,
yeah.
Look, man, I want to be very optimistic. I do. More than anybody, I want to be optimistic. I'm going into this season with LSU just, hey, prove it. You did what you think you needed to do. Now you got to go and prove it. I can see anything happening here. I don't think that their floor is 8-4 again, if I'm just being honest. I think they're a 9-3, 10-2 level team. That's where I see them. They got enough talent to be 9-3. Joe, they're a win away from being it last year, but wheels fell off at the end of the year. We'll see.
I think the schedule too does set them up. I know that we're closing out here, but the schedule sets them up to go 10-2. There's a lot of chances for redemption, to get revenge against a lot of the big teams that you suffered awful losses.
Florida, South Carolina.
Yeah. You can really make your mark against those teams. 10-2 is doable. And there's no reason why LSU can't get to the playoff. In the expanded era, they've got one of the easier SEC schedules. Getting to the playoff should be the expectation.
I don't think it's easy at all.
I think it's easier than some of the teams that we've talked about. Like, I think Georgia's got a gauntlet. Texas has got a tough schedule. Alabama's got a gauntlet like we went through. It's on the easier side.
They
don't play Georgia.
No, they don't play Georgia or Texas. But read off all the quarterbacks in order.
DJ Lagway, but you get him at home. Whoever Southeastern Louisiana's quarterback will be a tough one. Austin Simmons on the road.
Well, you missed Cade Klubnik too.
Cade Klubnik at the beginning of the season. Lenora Sellers, you get him at home. At Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia, who we're not that high on. You host Ty Simpson. You travel to deal with Taylor Green, which could be a trap. And then you host
I think Arkansas is at
home.
Yeah.
Arkansas
and Mateer.
Yeah.
Shit.
I think compared to some of the other schedules I've read, there's trap games in here. There's a lot of trap games. We're kind of banking on Florida and Ole Miss being great this year.
I would take Austin Simmons today, even with just one drive.